Hi everybody, this is Patty Sliney, Handy Quilter National Educator, and I'm creating a little video today based on a question that one of our group members had on one of our Facebook Pro Stitcher groups. She wanted to know, she was doing some custom quilting and she was quilting in a sawtooth star block, and she wanted to know how she could order her designs and have them stitch out in an easy logical sequence. She wasn't sure how to reorder them, so I wanted to show you today how to do that and how to do a little bit of placing using both Modify Skew and Modify Align. I want to make sure I cover tools that both Pro Stitcher Premium and Light users have to use in their systems. So I'm going to show that today, and you're going to have to use your imagination just a little bit because we're not at a quilt top, at a machine where we can look down and see the block. So what I've done is I've created a line drawing using Pro Stitcher's Record and Mark tool. So I've got a little sawtooth star block here that's 12 by 12, probably close to the same size that the group member was using in her throat space, because she did mention that the block fit in her throat space. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I would do this if I were standing at my quilt and custom quilting this quilt block. I have a little system I use. It's not necessarily the only way or the right way. There's lots of ways to do things, but it's what I use because it makes sense to me and gives me kind of a system or a sense of order, so I know what I did before and what I need to do next. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can see, and you can see I've got all my design elements already on my workspace, and there's a reason for that. Since I'm going to be using the skew tool, one of the things Pro Stitcher doesn't care for is if you try to skew an already skewed design. So it's always better to use a fresh new design for each of your sections of your quilt that you want to place into an area and use your Modify Skew tool. Even if you've skewed it and baselined it, it doesn't like it when you copy that skewed design and try and skew it again. You might be able to get away with it for a couple of skews, but maybe after 3 or 4 times, it's going to start doing some weird things. So use a fresh design for each of your areas. I've got 4 triangle sections here, and I've got 4 corners. So I've got each of my design elements kind of lined up ready to use. So let's zoom in here. So it's a little bit easier to see, and so my area, I can make my area pretty accurate. A couple things I want to point out too for some of you. I've had some people say online, you know, I turn my zoom on and I can't turn it off. These tools here, these 4 tools, select, pan, zoom, and X-form, and you see a 5th tool, simulate, that will show up when you're on your laptop using Pro Stitcher in simulation. These are not on-off tools. These are either-or tools, which means only one can be selected at any given time. So if you don't want zoom active, just touch something else. So right now I'm going to use simulate because I'm going to use my mouse to guide my crosshairs just as though I had my hands on the handlebars of my machine so I can create my area. And you'll also notice over here in the areas right sidebar I have snap to grid on. Do not turn that on when you're making your areas on your machines. I'm just using that for demonstration purposes because it's going to make my areas perfect. So they look nice for you. For you in real life, you want to be able to place your needle exactly where you want it. So you can create that area point exactly where you want it to be on your quilt top. So don't use this when you're in front of your quilt. Perfectly fine to use in simulation when you're practicing if you want perfect areas, but just know that's not what you would use in real life, standing in front of your machine. So let's start our first area. I'm going to make a 3-point triangular area using multi-point, and it's very important to only use 3 points. Remember, areas are always closed objects, so you never need to come back around and place a last point on top of a first point to close the area. They are by nature closed objects, and you'll see what I mean when I place the 3rd point here. You'll see a closed area. So let's go ahead and start placing our points here. And you'll know how many points you have created over here. There's a point count. So you can watch that number go up as I place my points. My crosshairs, and you can see we have a closed area. So, see, no need to come up and place that last point on top of your first point. If you do that, you're going to confuse ProStitcher, and your Modify Align and Modify Skew tools will not work properly. Okay, so we've got our area created, and now we want to select the design, and it's already selected here. It's black, which means it's selected, and that's the design that I want to put in here. But first off, we need to get this design oriented so it matches the orientation of the area. So to do that, I'm going to go to Modify and Rotate. And we have a couple of choices here. I'm going to move over just a wee bit so you can see that design better. It's very symmetrical. It looks exactly the same on the left side as it does on the right side. I don't have a start and stop point left and right to deal with. They're on top of each other because it's a block design. So I could use flip. That would be very easy. Or I could rotate it clockwise or counterclockwise 4 times. Doesn't matter with this design. If you're not sure, you're always safer to use your rotating arrows than mirror flip. So we've got this design now in the correct orientation. It matches the orientation of the area. So now I'm going to go to Skew. And for our premium users, you have a tool called Triangle Skew that will become available if you have a 3-point area. It will not be available if you have an area with more than 3 points. It'll be grayed out. So I'm going to touch Triangle Skew, and it skews my design in very nicely. I like that. So I'm going to baseline it. And that will freeze it in place with all the modifications I've made. Now, that being said, we have an interesting little, it's not really a bug. The developers didn't consider it a bug. I consider it a bug in ProStitcher. When we have multiple designs on our workspace, if we select another design like this and I modify it, which is what I'm doing by dragging it over here, that should make baseline appear because I've modified it. And as you can see, baseline is not available. So I've told the developers we always need to have baseline become available when we are editing multiple designs and have it be available for that selected design we've just edited so we can baseline those edits. If not, it becomes a problem when you skew something in and you can't baseline it, because if you clear the area, it will just pop right out, won't stay in place, it'll go back to where it was. And there is a workaround, and I'll show you the workaround because we're going to be doing that right now with this design because we're going to skew it into this area. So actually I'm going to align it in, and I'll tell you why here. So let's clear that area. We're going to create a new area. So I'm grabbing my handlebars of my machine, putting my needle here in the corner of my next triangle patch. Multi-point again. 3 points only. My point count says 3. This design is selected, but it's not oriented correctly, so let's rotate it. I'm going to rotate it twice clockwise. Again, I've edited it. Baseline should pop up. It doesn't. Oop. That's not correct. There we go. Straight edge here aligns with this straight edge. So now I could use skew, but I'm going to use align because I want to show our light users, since you don't have triangle skew, you can still get this triangle in here very nicely by using Modify Align. So I've selected that tool. I'm going to touch center to center it, but I need to move it over to the right. So I'm going to touch right here in our horizontal section, and look at that. Isn't that lovely? Again, no baseline. Watch what happens when I clear my area. Oh, nothing. Okay, normally what will happen is that will go somewhere weird, but if I create a new area and I leave that design selected, it is going to move. So I want to show this to you so you can see right away what happens so you're not surprised at your machine, and then I'm going to show you the workaround. Okay, it's still selected. As soon as I make this area, it's going to try to jump into this area. See? Okay, let's just undo that. All right, I'm good with that. Here's the workaround. We're going to deselect it. And the easiest way to deselect it, let me refresh my screen here so I can see all my other triangles. I'm going to simply select my next triangle design. This will cause this design to stay put. So now I can clear my area. Let's zoom in. Whoop. First, let's move our triangles over so we can get to them a little bit easier. So I don't have to zoom in and out. I want to try to stay zoomed in so you can see what I'm doing. Alrighty. Now let's zoom in. Because you want to be zoomed in on your machine. All right, so now let's select this design. That's going to be my next one. Drag it down here. All right, this one I don't need to rotate. It's in the correct orientation. Since this design is selected, when I create this new area, this design is going to stay put even though it wasn't baseline. Oh, look at baseline all of a sudden decided to pop up. And this is just, like I said, it's a random thing. And I'm hoping our developers will get this fixed in one of our future versions or for future updates for ProStitcher. So let's go ahead and create our next area. Alrighty. And let's go ahead and skew this one in using triangle skew. Okay, see how this stayed put? It's because this design was the active design on the workspace. So this one has just sort of been forgotten. it's been deactivated. It will stay put. Will this create a problem with not being able to baseline when you should during stitch out? Almost never will it with these few edits. We only have 8 designs total. I'm not making a lot of edits on them. So the final baseline will probably take care of most of the extraneous commands that we don't need. And it's just not going to bog ProStitcher down enough to cause a problem. But I can baseline this one, so I'm going to. Let's go ahead and clear the area again. And move over. Grab this design here. Okay. And then I'm going to scoot over a little bit so I can see my area. Okay. Grab my handlebars, put my needle where I need it to be in this patch. Okay, created my 3-point triangular area. This does need to be rotated, so I'm going to go to Modify, Rotate, twice clockwise, so it is oriented in the same orientation as the area. I'm going to do the Align again, so you guys who are using light can see again how this works. So I'm going to center it first, and then move it to the left, and that looks nice. Baseline's not available. Fine, that's okay. So before I clear the area, just in case I don't want this to pop out, I am going to select my next design. So now when I clear the area, just in case when I clear it, it should stay put. All right, now let's do, I'll zoom out a little bit. Let's do our corner areas. And I'm going to work clockwise again, just because that's my system. Now, we have a choice here. We could use 2-corner or multi-point, and it's going to be up to you when you're standing in front of your quilt. If you feel like that quilt patch is a little crooked, maybe, I would go with multi-point and drop 4 points in each corner. For ease of use here and to speed things up, I'm going to use 2-corner. When you use 2-corner, you always want to start in your upper left corner and set your first point, and then go down to the lower right corner on the diagonal to set the second point. That's how ProStitcher likes you to create a 2-corner area. Okay, so now this design is selected. We're going to have to rotate it. In the example that the group member had in her photos, she had this pointed towards the inner corners of all of her corner squares. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go to rotate it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So now it's in the correct orientation. We're going to go to skew. Notice triangle skew, no longer available. Why? My count is 4. When we create a 2-corner area, even though you've only dropped 2 points, ProStitcher counts it as 4 points because you've created a square rectangle. So that's why it says 4 points. Okay, so we're going to be modify skew, and you can use one or the other. I have found border skew seems to work a little bit better, but you can try both, whichever gives you the best result. If this gives you a weird result, then just click on border skew. All right, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to baseline it. Same process. Clear the area. Let's do our 2-corner area again. I'm going to select our next design. We're going to rotate it. I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise twice. Go to skew, border skew, baseline. Baseline is appearing each time this time. I'll take it. That's great. Okay, I'm going to select the next design. Let me move over a little bit. I'll move these down here. Get the other one. There we go. Alrighty. And I'm using my slider bars, which I have turned on in my settings view tab, or actually in my view tab. So I have scroll turned on, and that allows me to have my scroll bars. Just so you're wondering, if you don't have scroll bars, this is where you find them. Turn your scroll on. This is what I normally keep on in my view tab. I rarely use grid. Sometimes I'll use it when I'm doing custom work like this on my laptop. I don't use it when I'm doing all over edge to edge. It's just too much background noise. It's not used in all over edge to edge work. It doesn't help you with orienting the design on your quilt top one bit. It just creates a lot of background noise. So I only use this in rare occasion, and then I'll turn it off. Okay, so let's go back to area. We're going to clear this area, create our next one, move my machine needle to the corners. And I'm going to select this design because that was the next one in my little order. It's already oriented, pointing the correct direction, so that's handy. We'll just skew it in with border skew and baseline it. Clear the area. And then we're going to create our last area. Select our design, modify, rotate, twice clockwise, skew, border skew, baseline, clear the area. All right. And I'm going to zoom in here, move my crosshairs in the middle. When I click refresh, the refresh button will put every design that you have in your workspace, even if you couldn't see it, and any area you've created in your crosshairs, it will make them all visible in your workspace. So it depends on where things are out there on your workspace as to how zoomed in you are. So know that, because that's what refresh does. If you're ever wondering what a tool does, all you need to do is click on your question mark bubble and then click on the tool, and it will tell you that refresh centers the design in crosshairs so both are visible on the screen. It doesn't reposition or resize the design relative to the quilt view. It just puts everything that's on your workspace, no matter where it is, visible. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to rename these designs first before we group them, just because it's going to be much easier when we group them and then reorder them to know what's what, so I can get them in the right order. So if I go over here to our wonderful right side workspace and I click on the workspace tab, you can see This is going to tell me every single design that is on my workspace, and if I had an area, it would list an area on here as well. And it's always going to be in order of when you either created it or opened it. So this was the first design I opened. That was my little outline. That's the first triangle design I opened, and then I did a duplicate. I just did edit and duplicate, and I duplicated a bunch of triangles. Then I opened this design and duplicated a bunch of square designs, square feather designs. So that shows you the order. And I happen to know, because that's how I open them, I know that this was the first design that I want to rename, and I'm going to rename them clockwise. And I can either click on them here, or I can click on them here. Sometimes it's easier over here. Sometimes you'll have to touch to get right on a line to select it. But you can know that you can also click on them here. And I know that the first triangle I opened would be not that. See? You have to click around to find, that would be the second one I want to rename. But let's go ahead and rename them in clockwise order. See, I'm clicking here and I'm having a hard time getting right on the line. So I'm going to go back here. I know that was the first one I opened. I'm going to click on rename, and I'm going to clear the name and type something logical. So I think I will type, I'll call this top left square. Enter. That's why it wasn't working. You have to click select. Okay, even educators make mistakes. So I was on simulate. I needed to select. So now I can click here and it will select it for me. It might take a couple of clicks, but I will be able to select it. Let's rename that, clear, and we'll call this top triangle. All right, next, we will rename this top right square. And we're going to call this one right triangle. I know this might seem tedious, but it's important when you're reordering this many designs. You'll be much happier. It's much easier. You'll see in just a second. Clear? Bottom right square. Name. Triangle. Rename. And we'll clear that name. Call it bottom left square. And the last one, we will rename this left triangle. Whoop, there we go. All right, now I know what all of these are. This one I'm ignoring, of course. Remember, that's my line drawing. It's just there for visual purposes. Now we're going to create a temporary group, and I'm going to select them in the order I want them to stitch out, or doesn't really matter because I can reorder them. So let's do that. Let's just select them one at a time. And I'm going to use my select tools down here. You may not know about these tools. They're really helpful. And again, this is another reason why you should practice in simulation on your laptop. Watch this. When I float my mouse cursor over a tool, look at that. The name of the tool pops up. Isn't that wonderful? So this is our select none tool. This is our multi-select tool, and that's an on-off tool. So after you're done using it, make sure you turn it off by touching it or clicking it again. And this is our select all tool. So I did touch select none, so you can see nothing is selected here. Everything is gray. Nothing is selected here. Nothing is green. If I touch select all, it selects all of them and creates this group, which is fine. We can certainly do that. And then what we can do is by doing this, and you can see this is absolutely not in the order you'd want this stitching out. This stitches out all weird order, so we can now actually regroup these if we wanted to, but it included my sawtooth star, so I am going to undo that. And I'm going to use our multi-select tool. I'm going to turn it on, and I am going to actually select these. in the order that I want to, because that makes it really simple. So I'm going to pick this one first, which is top left square. Top left square. Okay, that's the first one selected. Now I'm going to look for top triangle, and watch what happens when I select top triangle here. It's going to start creating a temporary group down here, and it's going to be in the order I want it to stitch out. Okay, now I want top right corner, so top right square, not corner, square, sorry. Then I want right triangle. Right triangle. Now I want bottom right square. Here it is. Then I want bottom triangle. And then I want bottom left square. And then lastly, I can scroll down. If these start disappearing, you can scroll this. And now I want left triangle. This one. Okay. They look to be in order correctly. I didn't click wrong, so that's great. Looks like it's starting here. You can tell by the jump stitches that they go around. But I'm going to double check, and all I have to do in my temporary group is touch or click, and it will turn orange. And if for some reason I need to move them up or down, you look what has become available. My up and down arrows. These work within a temporary group. That's how you get these active. You have to create a temporary group, and you can move them up and down. If for some reason these are not in the correct order, you can get them in the order you want. So I'm just going to check to make sure they're in the right order. Just clicking on each one, and I'm looking at my screen. I am indeed going around in a circle clockwise. I'm very happy with this. It's perfect. Let's turn off our multi-select. We're done using it. Now if I baseline this, it's going to turn this group into a temporary group into a merged group, and it will just be one design. Instead of a group with 8 designs, it's going to turn it into one big design that has a bunch of start and stops. Boom. Just like that. So the person who had this question, she knew these designs would not be able to connect because they're block designs. They're not continuous line designs. She was okay with that. She knew she was going to have jumps. It was no big deal. She just wanted them to stitch in a logical order. So it was really easy. And I would actually probably do this exactly like this. Stitch the perimeter out. Once that's done, that stabilizes the block nicely. So then I can do the center star design, and it will stitch out very nicely without any weird pulling or shifting or anything. So this is actually how I do it on my quilt top. The last thing I do is I would go into settings, and I go into auto jump, and I would put my auto jumps at 0. That will not allow Pro Stitcher to move your machine and drag your top thread over and then start stitching. It's going to stop at every stop point and pause and let you pull up your bobbin thread, trim it, and then you'll touch resume, and then it'll move over without dragging that top thread. I don't like dragging the top thread because sometimes it'll break. I would much rather pull up my bobbin thread, trim, and then let it stitch out. So that's how you organize these designs in a logical stitch out sequence that it's going to work easily without really weird long jumps and moving all over a block. Moving in sequence to have a nice smooth stitch out. So if you have any questions, just put a comment underneath the video and I will answer them for you. I hope that helps. You have a great quilty day.